What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 138 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Ahoy, Max. I am glad to be back with you. I missed out on every show last week, I think.
Every show last week, yeah. It was a me and Steve takeover, the British takeover we were calling it.
Yeah, and you know,
I think British takeaway sounds better, but you know.
Yeah, it does, but I feel like that implies that you're just getting like British food, like you're just picking it up to eat dinner, right? Like it doesn't have.
I love that.
It sounds better.
What am I saying?
But I don't know that it has the same
British food
gravitas.
No, yeah, that's true. The takeover. I realized when I did three, because it's rare that I do three shows in a row. You know, I might skip one or, you know, skip Nintendo Noise or whatever. I think I'm getting bored of Ahoy Ahoy already. Oh
my God, you already need a new one?
Yeah, I'm thinking I need a new one.
I think what you do, maybe you just keep Ahoy Ahoy on Steam Deck because it's like full steam ahead, you know? It's like...
Yeah, nice. Okay. Yeah. So I need a new one for FlipScreen and then another one for Nintendo.
Oh, you come up with a unique one for each show. I like that. That's fun. Yeah. That's fun.
And then I have to just remember them each week. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Cool.
Good,
by next
great.
Week. No,
so,
in fact, by this week. Oh, no, because we're not doing...
By next week.
Yeah. By next week.
By the next time.
We've got too much to talk about for me to start fannying, so let's do other things.
Yeah, well, you got the handbrake out of the way, and I think, frankly, it was probably a good idea to have a little bit of levity at the beginning of this show, because I think this one's just going to be a lot of us venting, a lot of the audience venting. It's not a fun one today, but it's definitely one that I think we all need, right? Because Xbox has made some headlines today that they are shutting down three technically studios and undetermined amount of jobs lost, but some really big names here. We have Arkane Austin is being shut down, Tango Gameworks is being shut down, and then we also have two studios that you might not know, which are Alpha Dog Studios and Roundhouse Games. And, you know, we are going to break down the entire story. We'll get into all the nitty gritty, all the context that you need, why this might be happening, all that. But I did just want to start, like whenever we report on any of these news, just saying that my heart goes out to those affected. You know, I think most people, I think know, right? At least in this audience know that, like, you know, if you work in games, it's passion, right? It's a dream job, and you do it because, especially if you're a programmer, right? You do it because you love doing it, not because it's the most lucrative way to make a career, a living as a programmer, right? And, you know, I think the same goes for a lot of folks when it comes to art and music and all that stuff. Like, there are other ways you could probably make more money, but you work in games because you love games and you want to make art and you want to, you know, make things that people connect with. And it is really heartbreaking to see talented studios get shut down because of, you know, quote unquote market realities or whatever, right?
It seems like the passion sits at the bottom. It's like passion's very heavy, and it sits at the bottom of the pyramid. It sits down there, and it's sort of like that's where it's all collected. And the higher up you go, it just becomes like money, and then that, you know, at a certain point they've got to start cutting off the bottom because they're like, oh, there's too much passion down there. What we actually need is more money.
It's an exploitable resource, right? Because there's no shortage of talented, passionate people that want to create things. There are a limited amount of jobs to go around for those people, right? And when times get lean, right, and you see these companies, especially these big companies, truncate because they're afraid of, you know, a changing market. This is what happens. And like, this is exactly why, you know, amid all the conversations around these acquisitions and everything, like, you know, we've expressed concern because this is unfortunately what happens. And it's not to say that, you know, there's obviously independent studios that shut down all the time, right? Like, if it's not because you got acquired, it's because you ran out of money or you didn't line up the next game or what have you. But, you know, when there are less big games in town, right? Because you used to have ZeniMax as an option, or, you know, ABC or ABK as an option, or Xbox as an option, right? Like, you start seeing what gets identified as redundancies, right? Or as like dead weight or whatever, that, you know, maybe there was space for it in the budget before and now there's not, as we're trying to consolidate and kind of, you know, and I think honestly probably get their hands on the reins, right? Because we've seen the last few years their, releases not meeting expectations, whether that's sales wise, whether that's critically. And, there's clearly a management problem at Xbox right now. And
the thing about Xbox as well is that sometimes there's not an obvious metric for the end user, at least, of sales. It's not like, oh, this game sold X million. It's Game Pass subscriptions. But how many of those people already had a Game Pass subscription, they're just checking the game out, or how many people are getting that subscription just for that one game and then dropping off? Like it's with Xbox, it's harder to have those clear and obvious. This, like with the PlayStation, Spider-Man 2 sold X amount of copies in its first weekend. Great. Nintendo, this game sold 1 million copies in this much time. That is a tangible nugget of success. Whereas with Xbox, there's always this sort of like, well, did the game sell well? Oh, but does it matter if the game didn't sell well because of Game Pass? And yeah, it seems like that.
And that's the thing is, right? Like in theory, the answer was supposed to be no, but I think we're seeing that that's not true, right? And that like so a lot of the things that Xbox has been claiming are the case, where it's like, this game was a success by every metric, and it doesn't matter that it did this or that. And that's the great thing about Game Pass. And it's like this right now is proving that was all bullshit. And
it's really shining a lot of light. It's really like recontextualizing a lot of the previous stuff that we've seen from Xbox, and also probably highlighting some potential fears and worries about just every other studio. If you can be Tango Gameworks, release a game like you say that they said by every metric was a success, and they can still get shut down. It's the same with when PlayStation had to cut off a bunch of Insomniac. They just released Spider-Man 2, a game that was very successful in critics, in sales, in everything, and they still had to lose a bunch of their team.
Yeah,
I understand. Like, I know there was previous what's the word I'm looking for? Let go. They let people go previously in the layoffs earlier in the year from Microsoft. Whoopsie, where they said a lot of the teams were a lot of the people being let go were like individual marketing teams, individual teams that were inside Activision, Intervide, all these things that have now been consolidated down into Xbox. But this isn't that. This is just purely we are cutting off this talent. We are letting these people go, not because we've already got a team that handles that. It's and where did the IP go as well?
And I think you brought up the PlayStation example, and that was one of the things that Steve and I were talking about when we reported on that story, right? Where it's like it doesn't make it any better that people lost their jobs, but in that case, at least, like there was kind of a way you could wrap your head around it, right? Because it's like, okay, if Sony had built these teams, right, these sub teams within their established studios to specifically work on online stuff, and then now they're deciding, hey, like we're pivoting away from live service additions to these games, right? And we're not going to put out like Spider-Man: The Great Web. Then it's like, well, what are all those people working on? And if you hired people that specifically had a skill set to make an online multiplayer game, right, or a mode to a game, and now you're not doing that anymore, then it's like it's not always as easy as just like shuffling them onto another team, because the skills might not be applicable, and it's like that sucks, but you can wrap your head around it. Whereas you look at the Tango thing, and we're going to get into it in a minute, but I think, like to see them come off of a game that was a critical darling, that Xbox said was a success, that was, looked at as one of the best releases on Xbox of the year, if not the best, by some accounts, had attention at the Game Awards and all that stuff. And that's still not enough to keep the studio afloat when, that's...
And they're still about to release the game again. They've just released it again on PlayStation. They're just about to...
And they were talking about how that was to see about how you can improve profitability of these smaller games. Yeah. And they're just not even giving them a chance, And
this game is about to release on Switch, possibly the second Switch, either later this year or next year. And the studio that made it aren't going to be there to benefit from that. Because they don't exist.
I do want to talk about kind of the specifics of like what happened at these studios. So let's start with Tango, because I think Tango is probably the one that is like the hardest to wrap your head around, right? Because Arkane obviously just came off of a public failure, so it's like Arkane Austin, right? Arkane Lion, which is the studio that is the original Arkane studio. They were the one that did the first Dishonored. They did Dishonored 2. Austin is the one that did Prey. And then Redfall. That's the studio that's closing, which is a silver lining, I'll say, right? Like obviously it's
Blade.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously that team is now working on the Blade game, which is hopefully going to lead to security for them, because you got to imagine that'll be a visible success, right? And there's money from Marvel to keep that project alive.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
and it's an existing IP. It's an existing IP, which I think is a struggle. But
we're gonna get to all that. I promise. I got talking points. So with Tango, right? We got a comment here, which was something that I wanted to touch on in the reporting today. So Trendy Brendy wrote in and said, looks like the studio founder left Tango within a month of Hi-Fi Rush's release. Did he maybe see something like this coming? Regardless, the company still had its talent, and I just don't get why you'd let go of such talent when you've got it. So I saw a lot of people talking about that, and I do want to kind of give you all the context of this. So Shinji Mikami is the founder of the studio. He's best known as, he had a really historic run at Capcom, and he's best known as, the creator of the Resident Evil franchise, as well as stuff like Dino Crisis and some of their other successful games of that era. And he left Capcom after like 20 years to found Tango in 2010. They were very quickly acquired by ZeniMax, and they've been releasing games under that banner ever since. He announced a little over a year ago, it was in February of last year, that he had intentions to leave the studio. So I think, a lot of people were looking at this as like, oh, was that kind of the writing on the wall, right? Did that put the studio in an uncertain position? And I think that makes sense when you ask that question. But I think what I found really frustrating was that when I went and looked at the creative, the list of folks that were, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the top level creative talent that worked on Hi-Fi Rush. Shinji didn't work on the game. Obviously he runs the studio and he, approved it, and I'm sure was potentially involved in getting it off the ground and everything. But the main talent that worked on the game was not him. So the idea that with him gone, the studio now has no ability to create another game. The talent that made Hi-Fi Rush was seemingly still there. So I totally agree with Trendy Brendy. And I think I wanted to bring in a story that got reported, and again, about a year ago, right? It was about a month after that announcement, where Jeff Grubb over at Giant Bomb had a report in March 2023 that the game, quote, didn't make the money that it needed to make. And that ended up there was a lot of conversation around that online, and people kind of, talking about, if this isn't a success, then what is, right? And there was an exchange on Twitter between Jez Corden and Aaron Greenberg, who is, Jez is a, commentator, games, journalist personality. And Aaron Greenberg, of course, is the VP of Xbox Games Marketing, right? So Jez was kind of quote tweeting, talking about this story and everything, and said, what exactly determines success for an Xbox game these days? Hi-Fi Rush, as far as I know, has no physical version, no marketing, no multiplayer. If Xbox is pressuring ZeniMax to deliver sales of its games, maybe it shouldn't put so much emphasis on Game Pass. What's the goal here? And that's like what you were saying, right? And Aaron, responded publicly to this and said, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. So why is the studio being shut down? Yeah. What's the story here, right? If there is a reason, right? Like if there was an exodus of talent, if people left along with Shinji, if there's a reason here, then I'm happy to walk this back and, take it for what it is. But it's for you to say all that shit and to be pounding your chest about how great this game was all year, and then to reward these people with the closure of their studio when they had just found an exciting new direction, right? Like moving away from the horror roots, moving away from the stuff that Shinji's known for, and finding a new identity. And it's what
they could be doing, the sort of that classic, I don't want to say Rare, but there's where Rare are working on Sea of Thieves, and Rare are best known for making 3D platformers. If this studio could passionately and very successfully do that kind of genre in interesting ways, Hi-Fi Rush is a very interesting game. It's a unique game, but it still has its core Japanese action game sort of roots. Very much suited to a studio like that. That is a team that could be doing more of that.
It's an important gap in the portfolio, is the all ages stuff. We talk about that all the time.
And if the horror market is why the director left, maybe they're not doing any more Ghostwire Tokyo stuff. They're not doing any more Evil Within. Maybe there's not a market for them. Maybe Microsoft don't want to do it.
Or maybe he just doesn't want to work on AAA anymore, right? Like, it's like, running a studio is a full-time job. He's not that young anymore. And it's like, maybe he just wants to go work on an indie game and just make games again, right? Like, that happens all the time.
We saw it all the time before. Yeah, we saw it with Mega Man creator. He left to make his own thing. The Castlevania creator, he left to make his own thing.
By all accounts, that's why Tim Schafer sold Double Fine to Xbox, was that he was like, I just want to make games again and not worry about if my studio is going to go under and all my friends are going to lose their jobs. Like, and that was supposed to be the thing, is the safety net, right? And it's like, I mean,
do you think that maybe just without Shinji Mikami at the top there, I know he didn't work on Hi-Fi Rush directly, but maybe he was, because he's the director. Maybe
he was steering the ship, right?
He was steering the ship. So without him, maybe they couldn't find a replacement. Maybe Hi-Fi Rush was like, while it is a success, maybe you go, okay, what do we do next? And there's not someone at the top to do it.
I think that is what happened.
You don't close the whole studio. Surely you then get the right person to do the job. You get someone with success at doing that, the same way that.
And to me, this is damning evidence of a lack of leadership at Xbox, that your solution here was to be like, oh, we'll just close the studio. It's like, what? Like, why don't you hire somebody? Like, invest some resources into keeping this resource part of your portfolio. But that's the thing, is they've been acquiring so much stuff, and they have like all these studios now. They have over 40 studios. Who cares if they shut a couple of them from their perspective, right? It's like, we have all this talent. Like, they just made Hi-Fi Rush, but Hi-Fi Rush didn't make them that much money. It didn't set the world on fire. Yeah, it was a critical darling. But like, it's just one of those things of like, obviously, I agree, you and I are on the same page about what should have been done here. But like, if you're a fucking bean counter and all you're doing is looking at spreadsheets and thinking about money, then like, you don't think about it that way. You think about, we're trying to, it's a natural time to end this studio. He's moving on. The only reason the studio exists was because of him. Now that he's gone, what is its identity, right? And it's like, it could have been something new.
Yeah. And this can't have been a quick and easy decision for them either. They can't have just been like, cool, do it, announce it. They've clearly been thinking about this for a while, and this has been planning and all this stuff. So why not even let it have its PlayStation release and its Nintendo Switch release to see if, okay, there is actually a market outside of Xbox where this can make money? Or maybe, do you know what it could be? It could be that, they were banking on, the game did well, but, it doesn't have the legs that it needs to be successful. If we're going to let you make another one of these, it needs to be good. Maybe they release it on PlayStation. Maybe it doesn't set the world on fire on PlayStation. I'm pretty sure if you look at that, there was a article where we looked at last week where there was like our Xbox games, 7 of our Xbox games are in the top 25 on PlayStation. I don't remember Hi-Fi Rush being in that list.
Yeah.
I wonder if it just didn't set the world on fire on PlayStation.
And it might be that simple.
You already played it. And then they're not going to cancel the Switch release. They still could cancel. They might even not release it on Switch.
It's just one of those things that it's like, wasn't this supposed to be the point though? Wasn't this supposed to be the point of Xbox owning these studios, is that Microsoft has deep pockets, and that it doesn't matter if the game is setting the world on fire because it's creatively interesting and it is deepening the value of Game Pass and yada yada. Like, it's like, you didn't have to say all those things if you didn't mean them. And it's like have, it just feels like the latest in a long line of promises from Xbox that have turned to sour grapes, And
which is the studio that Xbox let go recently? Sorry, they let go, but they didn't shut down. They let them go and they've become independent.
That was Toys for Bob.
It was Toys for Bob. Do you think that there was a similar situation here? Because they still want to work with Microsoft, but do you think Microsoft were like, they very much could have been in this article if they didn't go indie and they didn't decide to do it?
To me, that was
one of the studios.
That was one of the things we talked about in that episode, right? Was like, I think that, it is totally possible that Toys for Bob was just like, hey, we want to go independent and take our future back into our own hands now that we have an opportunity to do so. And Xbox is like, fine, right? Because it's like in the same breath, like, I think they want to be managing less studios. So if they can allow them to walk away, maintain a relationship, fund their games, but not have to run the cost of running the studio and making sure everybody has health care and all the, maintaining a building, all this stuff that comes with owning and operating a development studio. I think that's why you're seeing something like like this team go away, is because like Hi-Fi Rush is great or whatever, but like Xbox could just as easily continue to do what they did with like a game like Thirsty Suitors last year, right? Where it's like, oh, we'll just pay an existing indie studio a subsidy of some amount of money to help them finish the game, and then it'll be on Game Pass for a year exclusively, and then we wash our hands of it, because at that point it doesn't provide us any more value to have it. It doesn't provide them any more value for it to be here. So I think it's probably mutually beneficial in that way. But I think that like that's what does that mean for these little studios that they own, right? That make these kind of games. It's not good, you know. It's
how
like
they feel about that right now.
Worried, I would imagine.
They could, we could be next, especially considering two of these studios that we're going to talk about I've never heard of, and I've not heard of one of their games. The other, the other one did some help with another game. But how many of these little studios that came as part of deals or just happened to be under certain umbrellas are just going to now be thinking, shit?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, and this is probably not the end of it, right? Like there are probably other studios that are going to get restructured in some way or another. Let's talk about the two smaller ones, and then we'll circle back to Arkane, because that's kind of the other big guy. So the other two that I mentioned were Alpha Dog Studios and Roundhouse Games. So if you're not familiar, Alpha Dog was a mobile studio. They most recently put out that game Mighty Doom that came out last year. Mm-hmm. And I think this to me is another one that, like, not to minimize what's going on, but this is one that makes sense, right? Like in the same way that the stuff we talked about, like Insomniac making sense, where it's like, okay, they acquired King. There's probably going to be an effort to consolidate mobile efforts across Xbox with, the talent that is known for having successful mobile products. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see kind of like a broader consolidation of like Xbox's mobile efforts under some kind of banner like that. And the idea that like this studio that has made a handful of games for ZeniMax, and their most recent game was, an IP tie-in that was whatever and, wasn't particularly successful or anything. It's like, what's the great loss of getting rid of this studio? Yeah. And there's a big cost of continuing to run it, right? If there's even 25 people there and they're all making $50,000 a year, that's a shitload of money. And that's not a lot, right? Like that, it probably costs a lot more than that to run the studio,
Yeah. I want to say now, I don't think that companies closing, especially when it comes to tech, is always a terrible thing, because there are companies that exist or they run their course, or I know there's a human element to it, but there also is a business element to these things of like, this is not making us any money.
Yeah, if you're not making something successful, then it's like, it doesn't feel good. It's not like we said, I'm not minimizing the human cost of the people at Alpha Dog that lost their jobs. Mm-hmm. And you can understand why they lost their jobs, right? It's a studio that existed, was made for a different time. That time has come and gone. They've never quite had a success to their names. So it's like, what are we doing, right? Why are we spending money to run this studio? Fair enough.
You tried and it didn't work out, and that's fine. That is a normal relationship between sort of, a company and its owners, I guess. That
particularly, like you said, when you're changing hands, right? When it's like, okay, well, you got acquired and new people are coming in and looking what's going on in here, right? Like, what are you guys bringing to the table? And the answer is not much, right? And it's like, all right, like,
because it's not like they built them specifically and they were like, this is a team that we want. They just came under an umbrella.
Right.
And they've not worked well together, not done a lot of stuff together. They're probably not, at a certain point you look at the books and that's that. That doesn't apply to these other teams personally.
Yeah, right, exactly, right? Like when you look at Tango, it's clearly a high functioning team that was able to make a Game of the Year contender, and now they're losing their jobs, and like that's just not right, Mm-hmm. That's a sign of mismanagement, I would argue, not a fault of the studio, And if that game was not the right project for them, then why did Xbox greenlight it? Like, it's like, why did you allow the studio that costs too much to make that kind of game if you were going to punish them for it? It's like, that's not right. And then Roundhouse is a studio that you probably haven't heard of. They've been around since 2019. But they are specifically, they are the team that was Human Head Studios. And when that studio shut down, ZeniMax took that whole team and created a new team. So they're best known for creating the original Prey, right? And then, you know, their version of Prey 2 was the one that got canceled before Arkane came in and took that over, right? So, you know, they've been there since 2019. It's been 5 years. They've never put anything out. You know, who knows if that means that they had projects in development that, you know, never got off the ground, or if they had something that they were working on in secret that now is canceled. Who knows? But thankfully, that team is going to be, you know, at least rolled into the ZeniMax Online team, which is the Elder Scrolls folks. So, you know, seemingly at least those people are all going to get to keep their jobs. Maybe some people will get laid off, but as much as, you know, the identity of the studio is gone. But I mean, like, what was its identity anyway, right? Like it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you mentioned this before, but I think they did help on Redfall somewhat, which doesn't, you know, if the only thing you work on ever is that, it doesn't look great. I don't know you know, how they helped, but like they were sort of helping out with that, and they could have just been like a studio that does sort of hop in and help people out. Like, can't think of any others now, but yeah, that could be their role. And I guess, if you're shutting down the studio they were helping out, they just go with it. But yeah, like they haven't actually created anything of value themselves. So yeah, it's a shame. But again, this is one of the ones that I see. But I also wonder if that's just purely because we don't know them. We don't know what they've produced before the individual people to know, oh no, that's big talent lost. But as a
the thing is, like, they're not lost though, right? Like anyone who's like the big talent seemingly has a job at ZeniMax Online if they want it. And I mean, that's, you know, the Elder Scrolls Online is a super healthy game. So the idea that you're going to take that team and at least it's, you know, most valuable talent and kind of be able to funnel them towards that project is, you know, probably fine. That's probably a good thing for those people at least. And if not, you know, a bummer that they didn't get to make something new, but you know, if it wasn't coming together, it wasn't coming together, right? 5 years is a long time to not have anything to show.
Yeah, and especially in I know that games do take a while, but to have like nothing, like
like how many people worked there, right? Like it's like if say it's a team of 100 and you're paying 100 people, again, $50,000 a year is probably not what they make. They probably make more than that, but say that's, you know, the average salary for 100 people for 5 years and you have nothing to show for it. It's like, at a certain point, you gotta cut your losses, right? And funnel the talent somewhere else. We do tend to give people, especially like in this industry, the benefit of the doubt, or we're like, oh, what a shame that they've been let go. For all we know, they've been consistently missing targets. The reason we haven't seen anything out of them might not be because they've been mismanaged. It could also just, they're, you know, not at a level as high as Xbox, but the whole studio, the studio head could have been, I don't know. We don't know what's going on. We don't know that there was potential there in the first place. You know, we don't know that they have been missing targets or not doing things or whatever. You know, there's always another side to some of these things. Yeah, and I think, like you said, right, we tend to err on the side of, I think, siding with developers, right, because they're artists and they're the ones that make the art that we love. So it's like you want to side on the like the creative person just needed more resources or whatever. But I mean, you know, you go look at any of Jason Schreier's books, right? It's like there's just as many stories of a developer, you know, or a team of developers, right, being the problem, right, and the publisher continuing to kind of sign them a blank check to like hang themselves, and then once they do, it's like, oh, we're shutting you down, and it's like, well, is that you know, is that EA's fault that they shut the studio down, or did they deliver a bad product and therefore, you know, it's like, you know, it's complex, but I think the examples of the studios that were, you know, Tango and Arkane, I don't think it's complex. Like that's like what we're talking about, where it comes down to corporate greed and just being like you know, a hostile towards creatives and being able to take risks, right? Because like, I mean, so the reason I wanted to save the Arkane Austin thing is I think that kind of transitions well out of the news part and into comments we got from you guys and just some of our personal feelings about what's going on. So I want to jump into talking about Arkane Austin in a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of May. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snackigo, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to show your support just like they did, if you want to write into the question block just like a bunch of passionate folks did today, you can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. Go over there, click on some stuff. It helps us out quite a bit, and it won't cost you a pretty penny unless you want to go over to patreon.com/flipscreengames and show your support over there and get some cool stuff like early access and the ability to get your questions prioritized, all that good stuff. So however you choose to get involved, thank you for tuning into the show. Let's get back to it. So Arkane Austin, I think, is an interesting one because obviously Redfall, just came out last year and was a massive failure. And the idea that a studio getting shut down after taking a massive L like that is certainly not unheard of. But I think, to me, the reason that leaves such a bad taste in my mouth is all of the grandstanding that Phil Spencer did when that game came out and flopped, right? And, I think we all remember, right, he went on the Kind of Funny XCast, their Xbox podcast at the time, and gave a very, very transparent interview, and one that we all applauded him for, that, he was honest and he took responsibility and blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of his quotes from that interview have aged like milk now today.
Yeah.
And I want to read a couple of them because I got to tell you, as somebody that has given Phil the benefit of the doubt, that is, applauded him as an example of somebody that actually plays games and cares about games, like, this whole situation has really, really lowered my opinion of him quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And whether it's, malicious, right? If you want to ascribe malicious intent, that he was two-faced and he was lying when he said all that shit and he doesn't really care and blah, 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 that's fine. I don't even think that that's relevant. I think he could have absolutely meant what he said a year ago, and today, these people still lost their fucking jobs. So to me, at best, it's supreme mismanagement and a focus on buying things and acquiring things with no thought for what was going to happen once you owned them and how you were going to maintain quality and consistency across the 40 plus studios that you own now. No vision for that. No vision for what leadership was going to look like. And that has led to amazing talent losing their jobs and, I think signs of a increasingly risk averse Xbox, which is supposed to be their entire benefit, right?
Yeah.
So
they're supposed to be able to spread very thin and do loads of different stuff, and now they can seemingly they can only do the things that make money, and then all of a sudden you've got a huge portfolio of companies that are now no longer safe bets. What do you do then?
Yeah, that don't fit the mold that you decided is different now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So okay. Here's what we know. Development on Redfall's ending. Xbox has said that they're going to, quote, provide make good offers to players who pre-purchase content that's never going to come out. And that's all based on an email that was reviewed by Bloomberg. Pretty much everything we're going to report on here comes from Jason Schreier's reporting, or is me referencing that old interview with Phil over on the XCast. So talking about the failure of Redfall, right? And Arkane specifically and their role in that, right? Phil was like very quick to try to take blame off of the studio and place it on Xbox's shoulders, right? So I'm going to do that now, right? He said, when I look at the review scores of this game, it's about, did we have enough creative ambition in our core idea, and do we realize that creative ambition? I'm a huge supporter of Arkane Austin. Their track record is awesome. I love a lot of the great games that they've built. This is one where the team didn't hit their own internal goals. And then, of course, right, there was a ton of conversation when Jason's reporting came out at the time that this was a game that Arkane Austin wasn't passionate about making. They were pushed into making a, games as a service, always online type experience by the folks at ZeniMax, because that's supposed to be where the money is. And it was obviously a bad fit. The game was not coming together, and Xbox did nothing to intervene, right? They allowed the game to continue to veer off course, despite the fact that everyone at the studio wanted the game to get canceled and wanted to move on to a new project. They just decided to push the damn thing out.
Yeah.
And
just to, send Arkane out to die, really, to put the game out, Phil to then come out and say, oh yeah, it didn't work out very well. Like, at no point was there like, we're going to fix this, I'm going to get involved, people are going to get involved. It was just like, didn't work out for them, oh well.
And even so, like, if that was the takeaway and it was like, hey, better luck next time, then that would be one thing. That was what I thought was happening, right? Was we're taking responsibility, they're going to get another at bat, it's all fine. And it's like, that's what you said, and here we are a year later, right? And it's like, that's awful, man. And, so we had a write-in here from Cold Soul who said, do you think this has anything to do with how Redfall turned out? Absolutely. If Redfall had been a success, the studio would still exist. If Xbox had intervened and canceled the game earlier, they would probably still exist and be working on something else. But no such luck. And this was the part I thought was really damning, right? This was where Spencer fully takes responsibility for Xbox's inability to manage their studios, and that, he believed Arkane Austin had the potential to continue to make great games, right? And he said this. He went out of his way to say this. So when we acquire studios, there are games that are in development, and then there are things that are either really early in development or not yet, or not even conceived yet. I think we need to improve in engaging with games that are midway through production when they become part of Xbox. And we didn't do a good job early on in engaging Arkane Austin to really help them understand what it meant to be a part of Xbox and a part of first party, and to use some of our internal resources to help them move along that journey even faster. We left them to work on the game. They're a very, very talented team. I love that team, and I still do, and I will totally bet on them to do another great game.
A developer shouldn't be able to be shut down because of one bad game, because there's so many decisions that go into making that game. Like you say, they didn't want to make this game. It's not like they came to ZeniMax with this game. Oh, we believe in this game. We'd like to make this. I think this is going to work. And they've gone, okay, but on your shoulders be it if it doesn't work out. They were forced into making this game because they thought that's what was good. Phil himself says here, that he bets them to do another great game. They have Prey. Prey is an incredible game. Sure, it's a bit older now, but it was an incredible game. It had a great DLC. It engaged a genre that people love, the immersive sim genre. It's one of the top games in that genre, and yet
they have a track record of, aside from this game, nothing but critical darlings.
Yeah, and they they release one bad game because they're forced into making this kind of game, and they get cut loose. And I think that is it's just mishandled, and I don't think any developer should be worried about releasing something that's not a success, because that could be their job there and then. You're allowed to make a dud. You're allowed to do something that doesn't work. If you're being pushed into making something that doesn't work, then surely the studio should be like, right, what didn't work there? That was our involvement. We forced you into making something you're not known for, you're not very good at, you're not experienced in. That's on us. They should be reevaluating, like you said here. They should be reevaluating, looking at what is and isn't working, not then, what was this, less than a year later, cutting them off.
Having them continue to support a dead game and then punish them for it a year later.
Yeah. Because they could have cut Redfall the second it came out and it wasn't doing well. They could have cut that. Sure, they had people that had bought the game, but they're already going to make it up. Why didn't they make it up to them then at the start and say, cool, right, we're going to cut our losses.
Take your lumps and pivot. Exactly.
Yeah. Games have been shut down very quickly, and then teams have survived, right? That we've had examples where that's not the case, like with The Day Before, for example, where that game came out within a weekend, was shut down and the team went. But that was also because
they ran out of money.
Money because they'd overpromised, underdelivered. All
Xbox has the money to keep the studio open.
Exactly. And it's frustrating. And while I don't think Redfall was underrated, I don't think any of that. I do think Redfall was a mistake, and I think at launch it was a mistake. Every time we spoke about that, both of us were going I don't know, I don't get it, man. I don't understand what this is about. And yeah, they should have cut their losses and pivoted to do something else, not forced them, like you say, Phil says, I think they've got another good game in them, and then don't let them do it for a year. It's just frustrating.
It's annoying too, because it's like, I think there's a universe where they get involved and they're like, hey, like, what if we just make this a single player game and make it good?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like that.
I mean,
the idea was cool.
Too late to do that. Yeah, I agree. The idea was cool. I think it's at a certain point it's too late to do that. For example, people thought that was going to happen with Suicide Squad kills the Justice League. They
Sure.
Thought, okay,
but that's my thing, though. If they had intervened when they acquired the studio and it was still midway through production, it wouldn't have been too late to pivot at that point. And maybe the game was never going to be good, but like the idea, I think, was good, right? And it's like, okay, what if you just make this as an immersive sim and like let them start over?
Do what you do well. Do what you do best. Do what you do better than other companies do.
Like at least to have given them the chance to make something. And I don't mean after it already came out, right? Like I'm saying, like, if they had done what they should have done and gotten involved and been like, this is not, you guys don't want to work on this, it doesn't look good, what are we doing here? Like, pivot the idea to single player, or just be like, all right, let's cut our losses and move on to the next game and like let you guys try something else. And like, again, like giving them the same opportunity you're giving Arkane Lions, right? Where it's like, work on a IP or something where you can, raise the status of your studio and like, you tell me there's not another Marvel character we can throw them? There's hundreds of thousands of them, it's
I'll just fold them back into the main Arkane, I guess. I know they're different studios, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, that would be tough because it's like they'd have to, anybody that works there would have to relocate from Austin to France, Yeah,
okay, fair enough. What frustrates me and has frustrated me all year, 2 years, however long we've been having these huge cuts, is that we've seen entire teams shut down. We've seen so many people lose their jobs. We've seen people let go just like needlessly. I cannot think of a single studio head or executive that has had that same treatment, whether we don't hear about it. But Phil Spencer gets to sit at the top and keep his job. Jim Ryan is leaving, but I don't know if he was just pushed out, but there's pictures of him.
I mean, even if he is, right? He's walking away with millions of dollars.
Exactly.
To leave.
He gets to walk away with his head held high. There's pictures of him with a team in London weeks before they all lost their jobs, and he just gets to sort of walk away. No disgrace, doesn't get to shut down. Phil Spencer is coming away from this absolutely fine. There's, maybe his reputation's a bit damaged, but he's still sitting at the top. He's still, at no point has anyone that's making these decisions or anyone that's mishandling all this stuff feeling any consequences. The only people that are feeling consequences are the creative people that are creating these games, the people that are passionate about it. And I just think that is a huge shame. I just think people need to start losing their jobs that aren't the lower rungs, the talented people who, they're expendable. I think people need to start losing they need to restructure. They need to get someone else as head of Xbox that has an idea, has a vision. Someone like Herman Holst, where he's been the head of the studio. He's now heading, Sony, I can't remember what it is now, partnerships, whatever he does now.
It's the SIE, so Sony Interactive Entertainment, the parent PlayStation Studios.
Yeah, and that's working for him. Whether you also don't just bring up creatives and instead you get people who are capable of doing both, capable of running businesses, but also are, understanding of what it just feels like these people are looking just at money and not, they're looking at old market trends. They're trying to chase trends. They're trying to get the next Fortnite. They're trying to, chase live service, and they're not willing to let it go. And then they're going to punish the people that make these products instead of actually themselves going, okay, cool, I'm going to step down, or, I've made a mistake. You just don't see that, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's deeply frustrating. And I think it's particularly annoying in the context of like, it's just because it's a failure of Western business, right? Like, we often cite, that example in 2015, right, where Satoru Iwata took a pay cut to make sure that nobody at Nintendo lost their jobs, right? Like during a downturn while he was at the helm, and that is often characterized as like, this altruistic thing he did because he's such a great guy. And maybe that's true. And it's because of the realities of Japanese business law that happened, right? It's like there are safety nets to protect people from mass layoffs because of mismanagement by upper level employees. And, I saw somebody tweeting about how, like just based on like stock bonuses alone, right? Like Phil Spencer's taking home $10 million a year, not even his salary, right? And it's like, to have somebody with that degree of wealth making all these acquisitions and then, like seemingly just fumbling the bag and like making it be all these working class people that are the ones who have to pay the price. It's a bad look, and it's one that, any goodwill or respect that I was willing to extend to him is something that I won't now, because he's proven that, there isn't a reason to trust him and to trust his organization. And I do want to bring in a little bit more context and then get into some of your comments here. So this was from a tweet from Jason Schreier. Xbox head of studios Matt Booty wrote in an email to staff that, quote, "We are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games. Not yet clear how many jobs will be lost." And then there are additional quotes from Matt Booty that came from the email that Bloomberg and IGN and other people have been able to view and corroborate. These changes are grounded in prioritizing high impact titles and further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games and beloved worlds, which you have nurtured over many decades. Then he also said, quote, "Bethesda remains one of the key pillars of Xbox." And then, it's like mentions Starfield and Indiana Jones and right. So, let's pull in this question. This one comes from Andy Ratz, who said, Xbox head of studios Matt Booty wrote an email that we are making tough decisions, blah, 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 blah. So what are their priorities? Microsoft may have more money than an African nation, but here they are. But are they feeling a squeeze on their investments? And I mean, yeah, I think on some level that's got to be true, right? I think this is what I've been saying for years now, right? That it's like, at some point, the other shoe has to drop. You can't just keep writing multi-billion-dollar checks because you're betting on the future of a return, right? Like, or at least Phil can't afford to do that, right? Maybe Xbox and Microsoft can, but at a certain point, the powers that be are going to be like, "What are you doing, man? Like, you've been the president for 5 years or whatever, and we've spent billions and billions of dollars on all this IP and all these studios that now have all this overhead that we have to manage. So we're sinking more and more money into it, and we're losing the hardware race. Game Pass is making money, but not making enough money to make back the money that we've invested into it." It's like, at a certain point that's going to happen, and you're seeing it now. That's absolutely what's happening, right? Like, maybe it's, I don't know that it's they're feeling a squeeze where it's like, oh, like the ship is sinking and we need to turn it around. I don't think that's what's happening, right? Like you said, they've got more money than they know what to do with. But at a certain point, it's got to happen. And I think that on some level, it's probably you acquired another big studio that has a bunch of, and you need to take stock and trim things down because there's so much overhead cost of running all the studios that you now own. And yeah, maybe software sales are up because you acquired ABK, but so are operation costs by a lot, right? And, these studios at the bottom of the rung, right? The ones that are dead weight that are making games that aren't selling or that are not producing games, they're obvious cuts, right? And then this studio lost leadership. This studio, has put out critical success, but has never had a financial hit. And, how much talent is here that's actually irreplaceable? And, you start doing that calculus and you start making aggressive cuts. And to us, right, to the players, to the consumer, you have them. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? Like we're closing down Tango Games. Like but you have 40 other studios, right? It's like you got to cut off your finger to save your hand sometimes. And I'm sure that's how they're looking at it. And this idea of like, yeah, we could go and spend money to hire somebody to run the studio, or yeah, we can invest another 6 years and hundreds of millions of dollars into letting Arkane make another game. But like, is it going to sell? Do we really need 2 Arkane studios that make immersive sims that are critical successes that don't sell any copies? No. So we'll keep the one that has more legacy and has made the more successful games that people care about, and you cut your losses. And Like, that is gross and it doesn't feel good, but I think that's very clearly what's happening.
Yeah. I also don't think, like, we haven't really seen much of a turnaround from, you know, they've bought Activision, they've bought all these things. Where are these games coming out that are then they're benefiting from that? So, you know, now they're going to have to end up running up, you know, they're going to end up losing a bunch of stuff, really, right? Because where are these games coming out? They spent all this money, and so far they haven't had a return on it. And sure, the company's doing well, and they've sort of seen a record. They said they saw a record, whatever it is. What did they say? It was a record quarter or something like that.
Yeah,
record quarter after the ABK, and that's great.
It was, I think, specifically with regard to software sales.
Yes, yeah. Which again, when you think about it, last week they say that, and this week there's a studio closed. You know, it
seems to be the par for the course these days, though, right? Record profits, record layoffs.
Yeah.
And like I feel like we used to get layoffs in this industry, and it was just a thing you saw every year where it's like studios, you know, people get laid off, projects end, it happens, right? And now it's like just studios get closed instead, and it's So I'll pull in another comment here. This one comes from Wakahula, one of our Patreon producers, who said, yeah, sorry, but fuck Microsoft. I was so optimistic with everything they showed at the start of this generation, and even when they were in the process of acquiring ZeniMax and Bethesda, but they've really changed with the ABK deal. Why should I be excited for new games if the possibility of them closing their most creative studios? Who's going to be next? Compulsion Games? Obsidian? Turn 10? I think that's a reasonable question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Obsidian, if Avowed comes out and doesn't hit the way that they want it to, that's a studio,
I think Obsidian is probably safe, because Obsidian is a studio that if Avowed comes out and it doesn't perform, that's obviously not good for them, but they have multiple teams with multiple games in development, and I think that it'd be very easy for them to pull the trigger on, okay, you guys are going to make New Vegas 2. Okay, right? Yeah. And that'll tie into Fallout, and we need a Fallout game because Fallout is more popular than it's ever been right now, and we have no game in development, and Bethesda is working on Elder Scrolls. They're nowhere near working on a Fallout 5. What are we going to do? Okay, you guys make a Fallout. Like, there's a pigeonhole you can shove them in that keeps them alive, I think. I think it's the other, like, I think it's the Double Fines of the world and the studios that have never made hits, that make critical darlings. Those are the ones that are in trouble. I don't think Obsidian's going to get to make another game like Pentiment, unfortunately, but I don't think that means that Obsidian is in trouble necessarily.
Yeah, makes sense.
Not now, anyway, right? We'll see what their next couple games look like. But obviously, Outer Worlds was a success as well, right? They're making an Outer Worlds 2. I imagine that will probably perform really well. Like, I think they have enough going that the idea that they're not going to strike gold again soon is unlikely. Obsidian pretty much only delivers bangers, even if they don't sell particularly well. Like, their games are always great, and they have had many games that have been great commercial successes as well as critical successes.
Yeah. I think Wakuna makes a great point here of why should I be excited for new games? Yeah, like, if something comes out and Xbox is attached to it now you've got to wonder, like, okay, cool, am I not going to get to play this again? It's just going to come out and then that's it.
Is it going to come out and not meet our expectations? Like the last several games that they've overhyped and underdelivered on, right? Like, you know, Steve and I really liked Starfield last year, but like that was not the majority opinion on that one. And
it wasn't the 11 out of 10 that Phil Spencer said it was going to be.
It's just, you know, that's I think there is that risk, right? Of like, okay, well, the big studios that are supposed to be bankable, right, are struggling, or at least struggling to get out things that are, let's just say, on the same level of like what Sony's putting out, right? Like, and then the little guys that are putting out the exciting stuff are all at risk now, right? So it's like, where is the cause for excitement on the creative side at Xbox right now? And I don't think there is much.
What is the last, like, great, well-received Xbox game that, like, wowed everyone? And
for a AAA game that had no caveats, I would say it's exclusively Forza.
Yeah, that's probably it. Because Halo, the recent Halo, they fucked up in the multiplayer.
It was great at launch, and then they dropped the bag, and now it's good again. But the moment's passed, and they lost momentum with it. And the single player was, some people really liked it, some people were divided on it. It's not a clean W, right? Not like God of War, not like even Horizon, right? Which is like less popular, but it's like the general opinion is it's a good game. It's a good IP, right? The second one was better than the first one. It's on upward trajectory. Healthy studio.
Sony Xbox games like Redfall that came out didn't do very well. What was the Scorn came out, didn't do particularly well.
They've had a lot of little successes, right? It has been the Hi-Fi Rushes, the Pentiments, As Dusk Falls. It's been those kind of games that, are niche and are not bestsellers. And that's the thing is, I think him saying priority games is very telling, right? Like, I think that's the end of the small experimental indies at Xbox. I think that's been a failed experiment for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Andy says here, maybe Xbox Game Studios has become too big and unmanageable. And I think that's right. Possibly true, because they've got one guy who's like the head guy who sits at the top of everything. And where is that? You can't consolidate so many studios and still have one guy on top of it all, because these things come out, they don't do very well. Now, like, there's just nothing Xbox has coming out except for maybe Hellblade 2 that I'm like, yeah, cool, I know what I'm getting with that. That's going to be good, because like even Bethesda releases Starfield and it doesn't hit the way that like Skyrim used to hit. Arkane can release a game, it doesn't hit the way it's supposed to hit. It's just it's even the sort of the obvious wins that
the bankable stars, right? Are
just not doing it. And I wonder if that's because of Xbox's. It has because of Xbox's management, because I don't know. I couldn't tell you what it is.
I mean, it is, right? Because it's like, because even if like under ZeniMax, right? Like Starfield was in development before Xbox acquired it, but Xbox was the one that landed the ship. So it's like, if it needed more time, it's on Xbox for it not getting more time, right? Yeah. If this update that's going to come out this year is going to fix everything and actually get it to where people wanted it to be, and it came out a year early, that's their fault. And, Phil can say, oh, it's not as simple as just saying 3 more years, 4 more years, but it's like, sometimes it is, man. Like sometimes the game is just not fucking done. And if it took 10 years and it's still not done, then it's like, well, what are we, is it really worth it to push it out and cut your losses? And, I don't think so. And I think if you look at, the comments we saw from, I forget who it was, but it was a couple weeks ago. There was somebody talking about the reason Elder Scrolls Online ended up being a success and why it's been something that's been a stable part of ZeniMax's business for years now, is that when it came out and it didn't do well, they stuck around and they kept working on it and they got it to where it needed to be. Like sometimes, like
Fantasy 14, these things don't come out, but if you actually give them the time they need and the resources they need to become good, they can be good. But if you just completely, there are some things like Redfall, for example, that there was never enough time to fix that. No. It fundamentally just doesn't work. But yeah, it's been proven. These Fortnite, for example, Fortnite came out, didn't work, and they pivoted and then they worked at it. Yeah, like you said before, these companies want these things to come out and work, and if they don't work, they just stop. So what they should be doing is working on it. Giving it time, especially if it's a live service game. The point of the game is it lasts for a while. Don't then just go, oh, well, let's just keep putting out content. You take the time to make it work for players,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, like that's the problem, right? Is like the bigger a company gets, the less they care about that sort of thing, because you're working on so much that it's like, zeroing in on the specific quality of one game of 40 games in your portfolio. It's just there's not the resources to go around to give it that much attention, and that's what I'm afraid of, right? Like looking at the quotes from Matt Booty, quote unquote, prioritizing high impact titles, quote unquote, further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games. That means doubling down on the existing IP. That means not doing risky things like working on Starfield, right? And launching a new IP, because look what the return was. It was 10 years of investment for less financial return and success than you would have got for making a new Fallout or a new Elder Scrolls, right? And that's going to be the death of new IP in games, like, or at least in AAA. I think we're already like seeing this space increasingly become like Hollywood, where the only way that you're going to get something made is if you have an auteur at the helm, right? Like somebody like, Hideo Kojima, right? Who can get his game made, or an indie, right? Which is not going to have the budget of a AAA, not going to have the resources. It's going to price you out of certain kinds of games and certain kinds of storytelling. Or like it's going to have to be something that's tied into an IP that already exists, whether that's a legacy game title that we're bringing back, like Doom or something like that, or, like the Marvel stuff where it's like you're tying into an IP that already has, cultural cachet that you can cash in on, or, an existing audience that comes from somewhere else, right? Whether that's making a Fallout TV show or making a superhero game or something like that, right? But it's like, you're going to get to a point where those are the only kinds of things that get made. And we're already kind of in that, right? Like, think about how few new IP we've gotten in the last several years. Like, in last gen, like the entirety of the Nintendo Switch generation, right? We got one new IP from Nintendo with ARMS.
And everything else was a sequel, yeah. I mean, you've seen recently, Robocop came out last year. There's a Jurassic Park game released this year. They're all just cashing in on nostalgia.
Machine Games, right, is working on Indiana Jones, exactly. Instead of Wolfenstein.
James Bond, the guys, is it IO?
IO, right? Instead of Hitman, they're going to work on James Bond. And it's like, that's not to say that that's an inherently bad thing. Like, Insomniac making Spider-Man is like why we got, in my opinion, the best Spider-Man game ever made, right? And it's like, that's great. I love Spider-Man. I'm all in for that. And, like, I don't want the only big video games that get made to be IP from other media. It's like, I think a new, an Indiana Jones game could be really cool. A James Bond game could be really cool, but Hitman's really cool. So I don't know. It's tough. And I guess the last thing we'll close it out on here is just, we had a question from Voodoo Vic who said, Evil Within meant a lot to me. I suppose it's still possible to resurrect these IPs, but with other developers under Bethesda's wing, right? Yes, but I mean, that's the thing is like, people make games. What makes an IP special is the people working on it. And it's not to say that IPs can't change hands and that you can't find a new generation of developers that connect with it and get it and make it work. But it's not as simple as just handing it to another team. It's like you need to have a team that has the vision for it, and that team's gone. So unfortunately, Vic, I don't think so. It's like, I don't think you will ever see Evil Within again, because that was Shinji's baby. And it's just like, it wasn't a big enough deal to warrant it sticking around now that he's gone.
But that doesn't mean we don't see him, hop up on Kickstarter and make a new, it's like Resident Evil Evil Within, but it's smaller and I can have more creative control and I can sort of do something fun again. And that's, that's quite exciting.
That's the hope
to do that. But you don't, that doesn't always happen that way. And some people, don't have the power and the budget to be able to do something like that. But I don't know what that's also just a best case scenario there. That's not guaranteed to happen. He might have just left to retire, or take some time or whatever, But yeah, I don't think we're going to see Hi-Fi Rush again. I don't think we're going to see Evil Within again. I don't think we're going to see Ghostwire Tokyo again. I don't think we see Prey again. Personally, I think that's it for all of these games.
Yeah, at least for the foreseeable future, right? Like, you never say never, right? Like, Arkane revived Prey, right? So like, it can happen, but it, I wouldn't count on it for sure.
Yeah. Screw Microsoft.
So we're going to wrap it up there for the day. If you guys want to write in with your thoughts on this week's show, please do. And please go and check out the extra episodes we have out this week. We have 2 episodes of Nintendo Noise this week, all about the kind of rumors about the Nintendo Switch 2 and then Nintendo's confirmation of the Nintendo Switch 2 getting announced this year. We got 2 doses for you this week. And then Max and I also have a short FlipScreen Games podcast, something new format we're trying out. These kind of like shorter bite-sized news episodes or additional kind of commentary pieces where Max is going to talk all about his impressions of Hades 2. So if you want to go listen to his thoughts on that, you can go check that out. It'll be in your podcast feed if you're an audio listener. It'll be right alongside the FlipScreen Games podcast as like kind of an extra special presentation. And of course, if you're over on YouTube, it'll be in the feed. So please go check that stuff out. Let us know what you think of the format. If you're interested in seeing us do more shorts and more kind of short episodes like that so that we can talk about more topics that don't make it to the main show. It's definitely something that I want to figure out how to do it. So if you have thoughts on how you'd like to see that format evolve or take shape, definitely write in and let us know, because if it's a good idea, it'll happen. So definitely write in. So thank you guys for joining us here on another episode of the show. I think I already said this, so I'm going to say FlipScreen.games if you want to go check us out, show your support, all that good stuff. It's over there. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.